Oh, it's so important to understand your life expectancy, my friends. My upcoming book, which will be out at the end of this month, I'm promising you that. Retire on the Wellington Fund. Literally that simple. I'm going back to when Wellington Fund started. It started in July of 1929. I'm just using calendar years, so I don't use 1929 in my numbers. But starting in 1930 and going back, just running numbers. And it's interesting because while the S&P 500 got smoked from 29 through 32, Wellington Fund got smoked, but not nearly to the extent the S&P 500 did. Very interesting, actually. All right. But the issue is that I'm showing a 4% distribution rate with inflation, a 4% distribution rate without inflation, 5% distribution rate with inflation, 5% distribution rate without inflation, and even a 6% distribution rate with inflation, and a 6% distribution rate without inflation. Now, why is that important? Because when I use a 4, 5, or 6% distribution rate without inflation, I'm basically saying a fixed amount. So we're saying 4% on $100,000 is $4,000 a year, fixed. All right. But Josh, the cost of living goes up. No, it did not. Not back then. Absolutely did not. Cost of living went down for the next 10 years, big time. So if you're taking 4, 5, 6% initially, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 off $100,000, and you're not adjusting that for inflation, that $4, 5, and $6,000 becomes larger and larger and larger because of deflation. All right, so exact opposite of taking inflation adjustment distributions. Now, if you adjust it for inflation, because it's a deflationary decade, you're taking 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, and that's progressively getting lower each and every year. All right, so anyway, the point though is that when you're taking, you're using, for some reason we always default on a 30-year life expectancy. And if you look back at 1930, what was your life expectancy? If you were 65 years old in 1930, your life expectancy was 77. All right, that's it. So, to plan for a 30-year retirement and using back testing when a life expectancy back then was only 12 years, doesn't make much sense, does it? You're sitting there thinking, huh? And the reason I point that out is because I show you that you could have taken 6% a year, adjusted for inflation or not, and survived. Your portfolio would have survived your life expectancy. Now, it would not have survived 30 years, but would have survived your life expectancy. Pretty interesting, eh? So a portfolio where you're not adjusting for inflation, just a flat amount, would have lasted 14 years. That's 6%. So you took 6,000 out each and every year without adjusting for inflation. And again, back then it was deflation. That would have lasted for 14 years. Your life expectancy was 12 years. All right. Now, life expectancy doesn't mean you're going to die in 12 years. But if you're using a 30-year life expectancy, when the life expectancy was 12, that seems a little bit odd, does it not? Seems a little bit conservative. Seems like you might be leaving a lot of money on the table that you could have used to enjoy your retirement because of fear that you're going to live too long. So let's fast forward. Actually, then, if you took it out, adjusted for inflation, it lasted 18 years. So in 1930, your money ended in 1948, which was 50% longer than the life expectancy for a 65-year-old back then. All right, so let's fast forward to today. This is obviously 2017. I haven't seen the 2020 numbers, so I don't think they're out there yet. Society of Actuaries, if I'm winded, I'm walking up a hill with old P here. Beautiful day, cold this morning, but beautiful. Society of Actuaries says, if you're a man, 65 today, your life expectancy is 18 years, 18.1 to be exact. So they expect you to live to your 83. All right. Now, if you're a woman, 65 today, your life expectancy is 20.6 years. They expect you to live to about 86. All right, so if you're 65 years old, you crunch a retirement plan, and you're saying, I'm going to live at 30 years of retirement, well, that would be well beyond your life expectancy. That'd be 33% longer than your life expectancy for a woman and almost twice as long as your life expectancy for a man. So, would you want to do that? I don't think so. I need a 30-year retirement plan. I'm 65 years old. You're like, so you're going to live to your 95? Yeah, but that's not what the life expectancy is for a 65-year-old today. Life expectancy, again, for a man is 83, for a woman is 86. Why would we have you live into your 95? Because that's the 4% rule. That's the whole point. Not only does a 4% rule assume an increasing distribution based on inflation, it assumes that in no way did you ever run out of money when Bengen ran it in 1994 for 30 years. But why do we have this magic 30-year retirement plan number? It doesn't make any sense. So the interesting thing was the 4% rule, and I hate to say rule, but the 4% number back in the Great Depression of 1930 lasted fine. The 5% lasted, off the top of my head, I think it's 28 years at a fixed amount, and or 24 for a fixed amount, 28 for inflation, I can't remember, but or 29 and 24, I forgot. But anyway, if you were to take 5% a year out, starting in 1930, it well lasted beyond your life expectancy. Now, it didn't last 30 years, but where's this 30 year? It's just an arbitrary number. Why not say 25 years? You see what I'm saying? So if you say 25 years, everything changes dramatically. Weird, huh? Even more interesting, actually, is if you look at if you retired in 1931 as opposed to 1930 in the Wellington Fund. This was crazy. Your money lasted in either scenario, all three, 4, 5, and 6%. And don't forget, 1931 and 32 were still bad. It was still in the midst of the Great Depression, just beginning that decade called the Great Depression. But that's kind of what we'd say is a sequence of return risk. But I mean, if you retired in 1931 as opposed to 1930, you could have taken 6% a year adjusted for inflation or not. And again, I have my numbers back in the spreadsheets I've been doing to write this book. So I can't remember exactly what it was, but you would have been fine. To 30 years, never mind your life expectancy. Isn't that interesting? Just that 1 year, So the point is, don't just default to a 30-year retirement. Know your life expectancy, man. And so you say, all right, what's the likelihood I'm going to live till I'm 95? It's quite small. So what's the likelihood you're going to live to your 90? It's probably use that as my default. That's what I do in Right Capital. I use as default 90. But don't do it just for 30 years because what everyone else is doing and say, I can only take 2.4% a year because I got to live 30 years retirement. Is there any basis for that whatsoever? And then when you rerun your plans, once you're a year in, let's say you retire at 65, and you had it for a 30-year life expectancy, just using that for example. Now you're 66. Well, don't use it for another 30-year life expectancy. That doesn't make any sense because you got 1 year behind you now. Use it for 29 years. So what I would suggest, that's what I do. You just keep in the Right Capital, you say life expectancy, 90 years old, all right? So that way it'll all automatically adjust your probability based on when you're going to die, which is 90 years old. You don't say, well, I'm going to die at 30 years from now, and now I'm 85, I'm going to die 30 years from now. That doesn't make any sense. So each year, your probability will increase most likely simply because you're 1 year closer to death, which means there's one last year that your portfolio needs to provide you income. I hope this makes sense. Again, the book is forthcoming, so I'm looking forward to getting this done. And I've been having a lot of fun writing this too. So if I haven't put it up for sale or anything yet because it's not done yet, but we'll be shortly. I'll let you know. Thanks now.